inch that way. Cashews are a big crop there. That was their church, and while we were in church, a bat flew in, and it was kind of funny, and somebody stepped on the bat and threw it out the window, and the worker went and got it later on and was playing with it. The people would just line up. Some days we would see 70 patients, and one day each of us would see 70 patients. These are two of my most favorite people in the whole world. And I was talking with her last night for about 2.5 hours about our upcoming trip on via Skype with Luciana and Layla. And the nurses over there have the right idea. They wear these long, beautiful lab coats that are colorful, and I think that it's great. You don't have to be you're never too old to do missions. I think she's 74. She's going to be going with me in 2 weeks. This little kid had a little fistula right here, and this is not repaired, it become infected. This lady had spots in her hand. She said, all the doctors have seen me, spots in her mouth, but nobody knows what I have. And I treated her for syphilis, which is not what she had. But with spots in her hand, I wanted to do something. I'm sure the doctors tested her for syphilis, but I didn't ask her if she had nosebleeds. This is a disease called Osler-Weber-Rendu syndrome, where you have little blood vessels that pop and can cause bleeding intestinally or in the nose. I think that's what she had. This little girl had a mass in the back of her throat. Her voice sounded like a hot potato voice, is what we call it. I took this picture because they also had mud walls, and there's a beetle that will burrow into the mud walls and cause a thing called Chagas disease, which I was talking to her last night. A resident has a patient with Chagas disease, and it causes heart failure, among other things. And it's caused by the trypanosomiasis, which is African sleeping sickness, and it's also called the kissing bug. While you're sleeping, it will bite your mouth, bite your eyes. It's what's called kissing bug. And it will lay it, and its poop will have the little parasite that will cause this disease and illness. We would see patients underneath the mango trees. This lady had there's another picture, but it's on RV Select. It looks like a circle. It's called cutaneous larva migrans. It's a parasite. And you can see it a little bit better there. It's not a great picture. Look at this guy's foot. He was walking on him. I once saw a picture of Mother Teresa's feet, and they look the same. You'd never know. We saw a lot of this. This is a fungus called Tinea versicolor. People in Brazil, their appearance is so important, and they all wore skimpy clothes, particularly the women. And they were very self-conscious of these little spots on them. This little boy very well could have had lymphoma, but I bet you he got scratched by a cat. It's cat scratch disease. What happened to this lady?
Bell's palsy.
It's a good guess. And it could have been Bell's palsy, but it's probably not. But it's a good guess. She had a stroke. She didn't even see me. She had a stroke, and she just kept on functioning despite her stroke. Okay, and I'm going to end with a video if we have the time, but I want to end with this quote. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness in the world's deep hunger meet. And regardless of whether you're religious or not, I think that this can help you with trying to figure out your calling. There was another quote I think I cut out of one of my other lectures. But actually, you know, I want to show it to you because it goes on that thing. But I think calling is something that's a little bit hard to figure out, especially when you're a college student. And trying to figure out what is your calling is it was a hard question for me to answer. And yeah, here we go. This is what I was. Somehow I skipped over this. So yeah, when you're trying to figure out your calling, look at what you love, and then look at what the world needs, and make a difference. This is directly lifted off that page I just gave you. I found this in the front of one of my medical textbooks when I was a med student, and I love that quote by Albert Schweitzer. Albert Schweitzer had degrees in music, philosophy, religion, medicine, and wrote books on all those subjects, or most of them. Had a lot of training, but he left all that training to go work in Africa, and is well known for that work. Whoever is spared personal pain must feel himself called to help in diminishing the pain of others. We must all carry our share of the misery which lies among the world. So I think, just like Mother Teresa said in the beginning, I think everybody in the room can do something. You might not have to go to Brazil or Kenya. You might just work at the local homeless shelter. But we all have a part to play. So, questions?
Does nobody else have questions, really? Okay. Do you want to describe to us like a typical day in the clinic? You mentioned one time you could see like 70 patients. Is that you personally, or is it everyone in the clinic, or?
Well, it depends on what context. In Kenya, in Kenya we had an outpatient clinic too, but I didn't work there as much. But in Brazil, which was where we were seeing 70 patients, Brazil will bring a certain amount of medicines over there, and patients will come in with their little complaint, whatever it might be, and then they'll come see us. And most times it's worms, vitamins, headache, joint pain, or like diarrhea, gastrointestinal bugs. And so it's usually a pretty quick encounter. What we find is the doctors, and my Brazilian friend has told me this over and over and over again, they have a socialistic medical system where our country is headed, and they don't get any time with the doctor. They have to schedule appointments to doctors, and the doctor spends 5 minutes in the room and leaves. And so the fact that we're actually going and sitting down and talking to them, looking them in the face, and spending more than 5 minutes with them, some of us praying with them, all this just communicates a world of difference. So a lot of times, like I said earlier at supper, patients would come in with a headache, but I would rely upon my translator to kind of tap into that a little bit better. And she'd say, yeah, I think this lady's dealing with something else. And you find out that, there's abuse or there's depression, and gosh, tears will start to flow down their faces because they've had nobody asking about that. They just have the doctor give them headache medicine. So the fact that we spend a few minutes with them makes a difference. So I don't know if that answers your question. So yeah, we would see patients pretty quickly, but in comparison to what we see here. And then we have a box of medicines and give them whatever medicines. Most times they want vitamins and worm pills because that's pretty common over there. In Brazil, everybody takes a worm pill every 6 months because they always get worms. So even people that are well off, they just take a worm pill every 6 months. In Kenya, we would see patients in both wards, and then in the afternoon we would do the outpatient clinic. It wasn't 70 patients, but it was sometimes 20 to 30. It was a lot. So, other questions? Yeah.
I just had a question about just like, I've never been out of the country before, and I'm going to Costa Rica, and I'm really excited about it. But like, what advice would you give me, like, from your experience, or just like, what helped you most, like, the first time you went out of the country?
Well, I told some students this earlier, but I did a horrible job the first time I went, because I just went, and that's what a lot of us will do. And so the first thing is to prepare yourself culturally, and realizing you're going to serve the people, and try to assess what their needs are. What most Americans do is that I went with a church group to Brazil the last 3 years, and there's been a lot of good things we've done. But it's been, the church group has their own agenda, for lack of a better word. I'm not talking about beliefs. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm talking about, we're coming to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and, then if the Brazilians show up, good, but they have their agenda. So going without your own agenda, going there to serve and to meet needs, and asking, and being very, very, very humble, and trying to figure out culturally, what are some of the things. I don't know a lot about Costa Rica, but there's a lot of books written. In Kenya, there was another resident that went with me, and he and his wife had read the Lonely Planet book on Kenya, and they were light years ahead of my wife and I. They would say sometimes, oh yeah, I read the Lonely Planet that Kenyans like this or don't like this. And so they would just know real basic things that probably didn't take them very long to read. So reading about that stuff ahead of time really makes a difference. And going in with a very humble attitude. And the other thing Americans do a lot of is we're very arrogant, generally, and I am an American. I'm very arrogant. So I'll talk about me. But in my arrogance, I walked into Kenya and said, "Okay, we're going to close all the windows. This is my way. We're going to do it this way." And that, even though that probably was the right thing to do, so I didn't get malaria, it was probably the wrong way to do it. And so saying, "Hey, do y'all mind if I close the windows? I'm cold," or I don't know. Just trying to work within the system and talk with them. didn't always develop the best relationships, because if you approach it from a friction standpoint as opposed to working with the people. One of the pediatricians I was working with who'd been there for about a year, he was really, really humble. He had a lot more training than these guys, but he would ask the people who were still residents, like first year residents, he'd say, so how would you handle this? And he'd been doing this for 5 to 10 years and just graduated. But he would always defer to them, and sometimes I thought, well, that's kind of silly. You're so much smarter than them. Well, that's not really true. He hadn't practiced in Kenya. So, but anyways, that helped out a little bit. Did you have a question, Tim?
What organization did you travel with to Kenya?
Kenya, I just contacted the hospital directly, and went ahead and just went. They had a form. Their hospital associated with World Christian Mission or something. I don't know. But I didn't go through them. I just filled out their application and went, which actually is fraught with problems. I'm glad y'all are going with ISL. I don't know ISL, but it's good to go. There's a lot of people out there doing a lot of things, and so it's real important to assess whether or not the organization you're going with, whether their mores fit your mores. Because the one thing they would do in Kenya is they would, I'm telling y'all, I'm trying to paint a bad picture, but just trying to teach you the things I learned, is that they would have people being preached to while they were waiting for the clinic, and so the chaplains were almost overbearing. I think that that's great that they were there to pray with people and give people support and whatnot, but they could have done it in a less, if you come, you're going to be preached to if you're going to wait for our doctors and that kind of thing. The other thing that they would do, for instance, at Timwood that bothered me, that Paul Farmer was very much against in his book when I read it, is they would charge. And so, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They want people to feel responsible for their medical care. So there's nothing wrong with charging. Some people didn't have the money. And so I'd say, didn't we just charge that guy 4 days ago? Oh, well, his family's went to get money. He can't leave until he pays. And so to me, that really bothered me, that we were, I don't know. If they really can't pay, then, I don't know. Ask them to pay 10 cents or something. I don't know about that. Any other questions? Yeah.
So, from your experience with 3 different countries, if there was like one thing or more than one thing that you would pack that you just probably wouldn't have thought of before you went?
That's a good question. You've got to protect yourself from just that. That's a good motto to live by. And so, whether that be malaria medicine or DEET, just plain old DEET stuff to spray yourself off with, that would be wise. Just to find out what those things are in that country. You can go on, it's really easy. The other night I did a Google search for Brazil and immunizations required or something like that. I went automatically to the CDC and listed out the diseases. So you've probably already done that for Belize. Making sure you have the required preparation, and you can look where you're going, and they'll have all these health alerts and whatnot. So dengue fever is really big right now in Brazil, and so I'm going to tell my group when we meet 2 nights from now that they all need to think about bringing a lot of bug spray and such. So I think that's pretty important to do that. One thing that is totally off the wall is get you a journal, and every day make yourself write a little bit, because you will not remember 2-3 years later, but you'll value it greatly. Something that you learn, a patient experience, or whatever it might be, because that's a smart thing to do. Bring real important thing to bring. Yeah.
So how do you incorporate all these trips with your practice from the States?
That's a good question, and it's fraught with problems. And there are some practices that are built for it or built around it, and I'm working towards that end. But the hospital system has given me a lot of trouble trying to sneak off to Brazil with residents. Most people just take vacation, but our vacation in the real world is 2 to 4 weeks probably. And so that's what I'm going to do this year. I'm going to take a week in Brazil and maybe a week I'm going to Guatemala probably later in the year. I'd like to get to a situation where I have partners. Some practices are built with such partners that they'll see your patients while you're gone, so you don't take vacation. So
do you work in the hospital or do you have a clinic?
I didn't tell you all anything about who I am. I got training in medicine and pediatrics, and so I'm building a med-peds clinic, but currently I have 2 clinics. I see adult patients at one place, and I'm a pediatrician at another place. And I work in the hospital supervising residents, doing an attending job. And so I have 3 jobs, kind of all over the place. But my goal, my